One emoji. That's all it took to set the sports world on fire. No press conference, no breaking news banner, no official announcement. Just a cryptic post from Deion Sanders that had fans refreshing their timelines like something massive had just happened. The photo looked innocent at first glance. Deion and Shedeur Sanders standing side by side, both smiling. But then people noticed the caption, or more specifically, what wasn't there. No explanation, no context, just two emojis, a Chinese flag and a basketball. And within minutes, the internet exploded. Was this a joke, a sponsorship tease, or something much bigger? Because the timing couldn't have been more suspicious. Shedeur had just signed his rookie contract with the Cleveland Browns, a modest deal compared to what many projected for him before draft night. He had slipped further than expected. Analysts debated. Comment sections turned toxic. Rumors circulated about concerns teams allegedly had. None of it officially confirmed, but the noise was loud. And then this post drops. China, basketball. It didn't make sense until people started connecting dots that may or may not have been there. Sports forums lit up with speculation. A few overseas accounts claimed whispers of a massive offer. One unverified report suggested a jaw-dropping $175 million deal connected to the Chinese Basketball Association. No mainstream outlet confirmed it. No official statement backed it up. But the rumor moved faster than facts ever could. Suddenly, the narrative flipped. Was Shedeur about to walk away from football entirely? And Deion, he didn't deny anything. He didn't clarify. Instead, he posted again, a short message. They said it couldn't be done. That was it. Now the speculation turned into a frenzy. Was this about proving doubters wrong? Was this leverage? Was this branding genius? Or was it something even bigger happening behind closed doors? Because here's the part that made people uneasy. Deion knows exactly what he's doing online. He understands timing. He understands headlines. He understands how to control a narrative without ever saying too much. So when he posts something cryptic, it's rarely random. Fans were divided instantly. Some called it a power move. Others called it a distraction. Critics accused the Sanders camp of stirring chaos after draft disappointment. Supporters said it was 4D chess. But nobody could ignore one thing. The idea of a $175 million overseas pivot, even if it was just a rumor, suddenly made the NFL look small. And that's what made this post dangerous. Because whether the deal was real, exaggerated, or pure internet fiction, one simple emoji forced the entire sports world to ask a question nobody saw coming. What if Shedeur Sanders doesn't need the NFL the way the NFL thinks he does? And that question changed everything. Draft night was supposed to be a celebration. For months, analysts debated where Shedeur Sanders would land. Some projected him as a first-round talent. Others saw him as a day 2 pick with upside. What almost nobody predicted was the kind of slide that would have cameras awkwardly cutting away as team after team passed. Round 1 came and went. Round 2, still waiting. By round 3, the tone had shifted. Commentators stopped talking about upside and started talking about concerns. Anonymous scouts were suddenly quoted. Words like attitude, spotlight, and distraction floated around social media, none of it officially confirmed, but repeated enough to gain momentum. And then it happened. Pick 144. 5th round. The Cleveland Browns made the call. Instead of walking across the stage as a franchise cornerstone, Shedeur entered the league with a modest rookie deal reportedly worth around $4.6 million, a fraction of what early projections once suggested. For most players, that's life-changing money, but in the context of expectations, it felt like a message. And that's when the conversation turned from football to politics. Was it purely about tape? Critics pointed to pocket presence, decision-making under pressure, and system advantages in college. Supporters fired back with stats, leadership qualities, and resilience behind shaky offensive lines. The debate wasn't calm, it was explosive. But underneath the football analysis, another layer quietly brewed. Some fans believed teams were wary of the spotlight that comes with being Deion Sanders' son. Fair or not, Deion Sanders isn't just a former player, he's a media force. A personality, a lightning rod. Drafting Shedeur doesn't just bring a quarterback, it brings primetime headlines. Now, to be clear, no team publicly said that influenced their decisions. And there's no official evidence of any coordinated effort to push him down boards. But in the NFL, perception often spreads faster than truth. What made the slide even more dramatic was how calm Shedeur appeared. No public meltdown, no bitter interview, just quiet composure. Meanwhile, Deion posted messages about faith, resilience, and being built for whatever comes. The tone felt intentional. Because here, what draft slides do, they create motivation. They build narratives. They plant doubt that players either crumble under or weaponize. But something else happened that weekend. While sports media dissected his fall, whispers started circulating online. If the NFL undervalued him, what if someone else did? At first, it sounded ridiculous, a coping mechanism from disappointed fans. But then that cryptic China emoji appeared, and suddenly the slide didn't just look like a setback. It looked like a pivot point. Because when a projected star drops further than expected, two things usually happen. Either he quietly works his way up the depth chart, or he changes the game entirely. And that's where this story took a turn nobody saw coming. The number didn't sound real. $175 million. Not from an NFL team, not from a shoe deal, not from Silicon Valley investors. From China. The rumor surfaced quietly at first, not from ESPN, not from any major American outlet, but from an overseas sports account claiming sources connected to the Chinese Basketball Association had made a historic offer to Shedeur Sanders. A 5-year deal, fully guaranteed, massive endorsement upside. At first, it looked like typical internet noise. But then it started spreading. Translation accounts reposted it. Basketball blogs picked it up. NFL Twitter screenshotted it. And because there was no immediate denial, speculation filled the silence. Let's be clear, no official confirmation ever came from Shedeur, the Cleveland Browns, or the league in China. No contract documents surfaced. No press conference followed. As of now, it remains unverified. But that didn't stop the wildfire. The timing made it believable. Shedeur had just slid in the draft. He'd signed a rookie deal worth a fraction of what top quarterbacks receive. Emotions were still raw. Fans were still debating whether he'd been undervalued. And then, right in the middle of that tension, came the post from Deion Sanders. The Chinese flag emoji, the basketball emoji, and no explanation. It didn't confirm the rumor. It didn't deny it either. And that silence created oxygen. Within hours, new details were being added by accounts with no verified sourcing. Some claimed the offer included global marketing campaigns. Others said endorsement bonuses could push the total past $200 million. A few even suggested it was part of a larger strategy to bring American star power overseas. Again, none of it confirmed. But once a number like $175 million enters the chat, logic starts taking a backseat. People began connecting dots that may not have existed. Shedeur had played basketball in high school. Deion had always embraced unconventional career paths. Overseas leagues have paid premium prices for American stars before. Suddenly, the impossible felt slightly possible. And here, where it gets interesting. Nobody credible outright debunked it immediately either. Sports media mostly treated it as internet chatter, but they didn't slam it down as fake. They watched. They waited. Because even if the dollar figure was inflated, the concept itself wasn't completely insane. Overseas leagues have aggressively pursued global branding before. So the rumor lived in that dangerous gray zone. Not proven. Not disproven. Just floating. And when Deion followed up with another vague message, they said it couldn't be done, the speculation deepened. Was he talking about the draft? about doubters, or something far bigger. That's how rumors grow, not from confirmation, but from mystery. And once fans started asking, what if this is real? The conversation stopped being about football contracts and started being about leverage, power, and global chess moves. Here, what most people conveniently forgot once that $175 million rumor started circulating. Shedeur Sanders was never just a quarterback. Long before draft projections and NFL debates, he was a legit dual-sport athlete, and not the played basketball for fun in the off-season type. We're talking real minutes, real production, real attention from college programs. Back in high school, Shedeur wasn't just throwing touchdowns on Friday nights. He was running point on the hardwood. He had handles. He had vision. He could create space and knock down shots. Coaches reportedly saw him as a Division I caliber guard if he chose to pursue it seriously. That wasn't hype created after this rumor surfaced. That was documented interest. But football was the clearer path. Growing up as the son of Deion Sanders, the spotlight naturally leaned toward the gridiron. The legacy was there. The development pipeline was obvious. And when your father is prime time, football becomes more than a sport, it becomes a platform. Still, here's the key detail that adds fuel to this entire China speculation. He never stopped working on basketball. While dominating at Jackson State and later at Colorado, there were off-season clips of Shedeur in private runs, gym sessions, and skill workouts. Nothing overly publicized, nothing marketed heavily, just quiet maintenance of a second skill set most people assumed he'd abandoned. And that's where things get interesting. Because multi-sport crossover isn't unheard of in the Sanders family. Deion himself famously played both NFL and MLB at a high level, something almost unthinkable in today's hyper-specialized era. So when people laugh at the idea of Shedeur pivoting, they ignore the blueprint already sitting in his own household. Now, does that automatically mean he's ready to dominate professional basketball overseas? Not necessarily. That's a completely different level of competition. But the idea isn't as random as critics want it to sound. There's also the branding side. Basketball translates globally in a way football doesn't. The NFL is massive in America, but its international footprint is still developing. Basketball, on the other hand, especially in Asia, carries enormous reach. If someone wanted to build a global identity beyond the NFL structure, hardwood visibility makes strategic sense. And suddenly, the rumor feels less like fantasy and more like possibility. Not confirmed, not proven, but plausible. Because here's what changes the conversation. Shedeur wouldn't be trying something brand new. He'd be revisiting a lane he already walked before choosing football full-time. That's a very different narrative. Instead of football player randomly tries basketball, it becomes elite athlete reactivates a second weapon. And once fans started remembering those high school tapes and off-season runs, the skepticism softened just enough to keep the rumor alive. But here's the bigger question. Is this really about rediscovering basketball? Or was that second sport always part of a larger plan, waiting for the right moment to surface? What if this was never about basketball in the first place? What if the hardwood is just the surface, and the real play is happening behind closed doors? Because when you strip away the emotion and the headlines, the $175 million rumor starts to look less like a sports decision and more like a business move. Think about the structure of an NFL rookie contract. Even first-round quarterbacks are locked into preset wage scales. Fifth-round picks, even more restricted. The team holds leverage. The salary cap dictates flexibility. Endorsements depend heavily on market size and immediate performance. Now compare that to the rumor tied to the Chinese Basketball Association. Fully guaranteed money, massive international exposure, endorsements baked into the deal, brand partnerships in a market of over 1 billion people. Even if the $175 million number is exaggerated, and again, it remains unverified, the concept itself isn't wild. Overseas leagues have paid aggressively for global names before, not just for talent, but for attention. And attention equals leverage. Deion Sanders understands leverage better than almost anyone in sports history. He built a career off versatility, branding, and controlling narratives. He didn't just play two sports, he monetized the idea of being prime time. So imagine this scenario. Shedeur signs his NFL deal. Draft slides still fresh. Doubters still loud. Then suddenly, a competing league, even hypothetically, shows willingness to attach a 9-figure valuation to his brand. That changes conversations. Now NFL executives aren't just evaluating a quarterback. They're looking at an athlete with international pull, a player who may not be financially desperate for their structure, a personality who can create value outside traditional systems. Even if he never leaves football, the perception alone shifts power dynamics. And here's the part nobody saying out loud. Leverage doesn't require action. It only requires possibility. If teams believe there's even a slim chance a player could pivot internationally for guaranteed wealth, negotiations change. Endorsement offers increase. Media coverage intensifies. Agents gain pressure tools. That's chess. Because whether this China deal is real, inflated, or strategic smoke, one thing is undeniable. It forced the NFL world to look at Shedeur differently. Instead of fifth-round developmental quarterback, he suddenly became global asset with options. That's a dramatic repositioning. There's also the long-term branding angle. Basketball travels. Football doesn't, at least not at the same level globally. If someone wanted to expand beyond American sports culture, attaching themselves to international basketball markets creates cross-border business pathways. Shoe deals, apparel lines, streaming partnerships, tech endorsements. The NFL can cap salary. It can't cap global branding. So maybe the real theory isn't about abandoning football. Maybe it's about expanding power. Maybe this wasn't a pivot. Maybe it was a pressure point. And if that's true, then this wasn't a gamble at all. It was a calculated move, designed to make sure no matter what happens on Sundays, the Sanders brand stays 10 steps ahead. The backlash was immediate. The moment the $175 million rumor started gaining traction, critics didn't hesitate. The loudest narrative. He's running from competition. According to that argument, Shedeur Sanders didn't like where he was drafted, didn't like the rookie contract structure, and instead of grinding it out in the NFL, he supposedly chose the easy way out. But here's the problem with that take. It ignores context. This is someone who has played under relentless scrutiny his entire life. Being the son of Deion Sanders is exactly a low-pressure existence. Every throw gets dissected. Every loss gets amplified. Every celebration becomes debate content. Running from pressure, that doesn't match the track record. Still, critics doubled down. They argued that going overseas, especially to the Chinese Basketball Association, would be ducking the NFL grind. They framed it as chasing guaranteed money instead of chasing legacy. Some even claimed it would permanently damage his credibility in American sports. But let's slow that down. First, there's zero verified confirmation that he's actually leaving football. The rumor exists. The speculation is loud, but nothing official has materialized. So much of the outrage is based on a hypothetical. Second, the easy route narrative doesn't really hold up. Playing professional basketball overseas, if that were even the case, isn't a vacation. It's a different system, a different culture, intense fan expectations, and enormous pressure to perform immediately as an imported star. That's not hiding, that's risk. Then there's the legacy argument. Some fans believe greatness only counts if it happens inside the NFL shield. That leaving, even temporarily, would mean forfeiting a traditional path to respect. But here's the twist nobody wants to admit. Legacy has changed. This isn't the 1990s. Modern athletes build influence beyond leagues. Nil deals, global branding, social media empires, power isn't centralized anymore. It's diversified. So when critics say he'd be running from competition, what they're really saying is he'd be stepping outside the system they're comfortable with. And that's unsettling. There's also the financial reality. If someone truly offered you life-altering guaranteed money, no franchise tags, no injury clauses tied to 300-pound linemen, would that automatically mean you lacked competitive fire? Or would it mean you understood risk management? It's easy to shout legacy from a comment section. It's harder when real numbers enter the conversation. Of course, not everyone criticizing is acting in bad faith. Some genuinely believe the NFL is the highest level of competition and that stepping away would limit long-term growth. That's a fair perspective. But labeling it as fear, that feels oversimplified. Because if this move, or even this rumor, proves anything, it's that the Sanders camp doesn't operate from fear. They operate from control. And sometimes, the boldest move isn't running from competition. It's redefining where competition happens. What if none of this was meant to be permanent? What if the entire China storyline, whether fully real, partially real, or just amplified speculation, was designed to do one thing: create leverage? Because in professional sports, leverage is everything. Right now, Shedeur Sanders is technically a fifth-round rookie tied to a structured deal. On paper, that limits power. The team controls development. The salary scale is fixed. The expectations are modest. But perception changes value. The moment the $175 million overseas rumor entered the conversation, connected loosely to the Chinese Basketball Association, Shedeur stopped looking like a developmental quarterback and started looking like a global asset with options. And options equal leverage. Let's break it down. If you're an NFL organization, and there's even a small possibility your young quarterback could generate international opportunities outside your ecosystem, you suddenly pay attention differently. You market differently. You protect the relationship differently. Even endorsement partners react. Brands don't just invest in athletes. They invest in narratives. And a player tied to a potential nine-figure international storyline carries intrigue, whether it materializes or not. Now add in Deion Sanders to the equation. Deion has spent decades mastering optics. He understands timing. He understands silence. He understands how to let speculation breathe without confirming or denying it. If this were a leverage play, it wouldn't require an official announcement. It wouldn't need a press tour. It would only need possibility. Because leverage isn't about executing the alternative. It's about proving you have one. Consider the timing again. Draft slide fresh. Contract modest compared to expectations. Online narratives questioning value. Then suddenly, whispers of a fully guaranteed international offer. That reframes everything. Instead of he has to prove himself, the story becomes he has choices. And that subtle shift changes negotiating power long-term. Whether that's future contract discussions, endorsement escalators, or media positioning, the dynamic evolves. There's also another angle. Even if Shedeur never had serious intentions of leaving football, allowing the rumor to circulate tests the waters. It measures public reaction. It gauges organizational response. It reveals who panics, who dismisses, and who recalibrates. That's information. And information is currency. Now, to be clear, there's no confirmed evidence that this was orchestrated as a negotiation tactic. It could simply be internet exaggerations spiraling out of control. But the fact that it hasn't been aggressively shut down adds intrigue. Because if you were desperate to squash a rumor, you would. Instead, the mystery lingers. And as long as it lingers, so does the leverage. So maybe this isn't about basketball. Maybe it isn't about abandoning the NFL. Maybe it's about reminding everyone, teams, critics, sponsors, that the Sanders brand doesn't operate from scarcity. It operates from optionality. And in modern sports, optionality is power. Something bigger is happening here, and it goes far beyond one quarterback or one rumor. Whether the $175 million China story was real, exaggerated, or simply strategic noise, it tapped into a much larger shift happening across professional sports. The athlete control era. For decades, leagues held the power. Contracts were rigid. Rookie scales locked players in. Organizations dictated development timelines and public narratives. But that model has been slowly eroding. Today's elite athletes don't just sign contracts, they build ecosystems. Look at how modern stars operate. They are media brands, equity partners, production companies, venture investors. They control messaging through social platforms. They speak directly to fans without needing traditional gatekeepers. Shedeur Sanders was born into that shift. From nil dominance in college to carefully curated branding, he entered the league already understanding that attention is currency. His name carries digital gravity. Every move trends. Every rumor multiplies. That's not accidental. And the influence of Deion Sanders matters here too. Deion played in an era where athletes were stars, but not yet power brokers. He's watched the transformation happen in real time. He's seen how athletes like LeBron James shifted from franchise cornerstone to organizational influence. LeBron doesn't just play basketball. He shapes rosters, narratives, and business ventures. That level of autonomy was once rare. Now it's aspirational. In football, it's more complex because of contract structures and league rules. But the direction is clear. Quarterbacks, especially, are evolving into full-scale enterprises. When even a speculative overseas option becomes part of the conversation, connected loosely to leagues like the Chinese Basketball Association, it reinforces a new truth. Top-tier athletes are no longer confined to one economic lane. Global sports markets are interconnected. Endorsements cross borders. Streaming expands audiences. International leagues seek recognizable American names to boost visibility. Even if a move never materializes, the mere existence of alternative markets expands an athlete's perceived leverage. And that changes negotiations. It changes how teams handle relationships. It changes how media frames stories. It even changes how fans interpret loyalty. We're entering a period where athletes don't just react to circumstances, they create them. They don't wait for power to be granted. They manufacture it through visibility, speculation, and strategic silence. That's the bigger picture. This isn't just about whether Shedeur would ever consider another sport. It's about how modern athletes use narrative as an asset class. Control the story. Control the perception. Control the value. Because in today's sports economy, influence may be just as valuable as performance. And whether intentional or not, this entire episode highlighted one undeniable shift. The balance of power is no longer one-sided. We're watching the athlete control era unfold in real time. So what was this really? A calculated masterstroke? Or a dangerous gamble? That's the question hanging over everything. If the China storyline, tied loosely to whispers involving the Chinese Basketball Association, was strategic, then it was undeniably bold. It reframed the conversation at a critical moment. Instead of focusing solely on a draft slide or depth chart projections, the narrative shifted toward global value, optionality, and brand power. That's not a small pivot. For a fifth-round quarterback, headlines usually fade quickly. Development happens quietly. Expectations remain modest. But Shedeur Sanders doesn't operate quietly. He never has. From nil dominance in college to high-profile media moments, he's been positioned as more than just a prospect. And that positioning is heavily influenced by one of the most media-savvy figures sports has ever seen, Deion Sanders. Deion built a career on understanding visibility. He knew when to lean into controversy, when to smile through criticism, when to let speculation fuel attention instead of extinguishing it. If this was orchestrated, or at least strategically allowed to breathe, then it fits that playbook. Because here's the reality. Even rumors create value. They expand imagination. They spark debate. They keep a name trending in cycles where most rookies disappear. But here, the other side. Leverage only works if performance follows. Speculation without production becomes noise. If on-field development stalls, critics will reframe this entire saga as distraction. Running from competition, more brand than ball. Those narratives are already whispering in certain corners. That's the gamble. Because in the NFL, perception can elevate you, but performance sustains you. And quarterbacks live under a microscope. If Shedeur thrives, this moment will look visionary. It will be remembered as the first sign that he understood the power of optionality in a changing sports economy. If he struggles, it becomes ammunition. Genius and gamble often look identical at the beginning. The difference is revealed over time. Right now, the truth sits somewhere in the gray area. There's no confirmed $175 million contract, no official basketball pivot, no concrete exit from football. Just possibility. And maybe that was always the point. In an era where athletes increasingly control narrative, timing, and leverage, sometimes the biggest move isn't the one you sign. It's the one you suggest you could. So was it genius? Or was it a gamble? The answer won't be decided by rumors. It will be decided on the field.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.